I woke up in the ICU, machines beeping, tubes taped to my hands. I asked the nurse where my family was. She looked at me gently and said, "They're in Mexico. They left yesterday." I nearly died alone. But when they came home, their vacation was over. Because I had already changed everything. They say when you're close to death, your life flashes before your eyes. That didn't happen to me. What I saw first was a ceiling, pale white, flickering with a light that buzzed faintly overhead. Then I heard the sound of beeping. Rhythmic. Steady. My chest hurt, and I couldn't speak. There was something in my throat. Tubes. Wires. And then a voice. "She's stabilized," someone said. "Lucky she made it through the night." I didn't feel lucky. I felt cold. Disoriented. Like the world had kept spinning and left me behind. A nurse with kind brown eyes leaned over and said gently, "You're in the ICU. You had a cardiac episode. You collapsed at home. We've been trying to reach your emergency contacts." I blinked. I tried to move, but my body didn't listen. My emergency contact was my son Mark. And my daughter-in-law, Julie. They lived with me. In the house my late husband and I bought over 30 years ago. After Harold passed, I opened my doors to them without hesitation. Mark had lost his job. Julie's hours had been cut. I said, "Come stay with me. We're family. We take care of each other." They nodded and said all the right things. I didn't know that 3 years later, I'd be lying in a hospital bed asking the nurse where they were, and she would say, "They're not answering. We believe they're on a trip." A trip. I croaked, barely able to get the word out. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "A nurse spoke with your daughter-in-law yesterday. She said they left for Mexico." My heart monitor beeped faster. They were on vacation. I was hooked up to machines, fighting to breathe, and they were on a beach? I stared at the ceiling, numb. Julie didn't even like the ocean. She always said it made her hair frizzy. It wasn't a long trip, apparently. They came back 5 days later. The same day I was discharged. I didn't tell them I was coming home. I didn't tell them anything. The nurse helped me dress. A social worker offered me a ride. They asked if I had a safe place to return to. I paused for a long time. "Yes," I said finally, though I wasn't sure if it was true. I stepped into the house quietly, holding the railing as I walked down the hallway. There were wet towels on the floor. A suitcase half unpacked by the stairs. Music playing in the kitchen. Pop music. The kind Julie liked when she was pretending to be younger than she was. I walked in and found her at the counter eating yogurt, scrolling her phone. She looked up. Her spoon froze halfway to her mouth. "Oh," she said, blinking. "No hug. No, are you okay?" Not even a proper hello. Just, "Oh." Mark came around the corner next. He looked worse, hungover maybe. His tan was uneven. He scratched his jaw and said, "You're home early." "I was in the ICU," I said. They both stood still. "For 5 days," I added. "I collapsed in the garden. Paramedics found me. You weren't reachable." Mark cleared his throat. Julie left her phone on silent. "I was unconscious. On machines. A nurse called you 3 times. Julie shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't think it was that serious. I could have died." No one responded. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I didn't yell. Didn't cry. I just walked into my bedroom, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at the wall for a long time. I had always been generous, maybe too much. I paid the bills. Kept the fridge stocked. I even paid for that Mexico trip. Julie had called it a stress reset. Said the winter had been hard on their marriage. Said a little sun and sand would do wonders. And I said yes. Because I always said yes. But not anymore. That night, while they laughed at some reality show in the living room, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the old file folder Harold and I put together decades ago. It was labeled, Deed and Trust, Home. The house was still in my name. I had given Mark the right to stay, conditional, based on care and respect. That clause was there in writing, tucked right under Harold's neat signature and the notary seal. They had broken that agreement. Not just legally, but morally. So I made a new plan. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to reclaim what they forgot was mine. The next morning, I called my lawyer. His name is Tom. He was surprised to hear from me, said it had been years. I told him I needed to update the occupancy agreement in my living trust and revoke the informal permission granted to my son and his wife. Tom didn't ask too many questions. He just said, "Do you want this done quietly?" "Yes," I said. "No arguments. Just legal, proper, and final." Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered every receipt, every message, every call log from the hospital, every piece of evidence showing they left me helpless and alone. I moved silently. Julie and Mark continued as if nothing happened. They started planning their next trip, talking about taking a cruise in the spring. Meanwhile, I contacted a property manager. "Is the house rentable?" I asked. She came over, walked the place, and smiled. "It's in great shape. It just needs fresh energy." Fresh energy. Yes. That's what I wanted. By the end of the month, the paperwork was signed. The clause was executed. The occupancy permission revoked. Tom sent the notice. Julie screamed. Mark looked stunned. "You're kicking us out?" he asked. "I'm reclaiming what's mine," I said calmly. Julie crossed her arms. "Where are we supposed to go?" I looked her in the eye. "You should have thought of that before you packed your swimsuit instead of visiting me in the hospital." They had 30 days. I didn't rush them. But I didn't speak to them, either. They tried to guilt me. Then flatter me. Then threaten to make things public. I just forwarded every message to Tom. And waited. For the first time in a long time, I felt clear. I wasn't being cruel. I was being fair. One evening, while I was drinking tea on the back porch, Julie came out quietly. She stood with her arms folded, staring at the garden where I collapsed. "I made a mistake," she said. "I should have been there." I didn't answer. She sighed. "But this feels like punishment." "No," I said, setting my cup down. "Punishment is loud. This is just correction." She looked away and walked back inside. That was the last real conversation we ever had. When they moved out, they didn't say goodbye. They just left. I watched them from the upstairs window as they hauled their boxes into the rental van. Julie slipped on the steps and cursed under her breath. Mark never looked back. They drove away. And for the first time in 3 years, the house was silent. But it wasn't empty. It was free. I didn't celebrate when they left. No champagne. No dancing in the kitchen. Just quiet. For years, I had been used to background noise, the clatter of shoes in the hallway, late-night bickering between Mark and Julie, the TV playing too loud. After they left, all I could hear was the refrigerator humming and the ticking of the hallway clock. You'd think I'd feel lonely. But I didn't. I felt awake. I moved through the house slowly that first morning, barefoot, robe wrapped tight around me. I walked past the guest room Julie had turned into her meditation space, and opened the window. The air smelled clean. Like freedom. In the living room, I took the ugly plastic recliner they'd brought in and had it picked up by a donation center the same day. I scrubbed the kitchen sink with lemon and salt. I vacuumed the rugs they never cleaned. By noon, I'd brewed a fresh cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched 2 squirrels chase each other across the fence. That simple piece felt like a gift I'd forgotten I was allowed to open. The property manager came by that Friday. Her name was Elaine. Polished. Smart. Mid-40s. The kind of woman who didn't miss details. "Place is solid," she said after walking the perimeter. "Your HVAC's newer than I thought. We'll repaint, do a deep clean, maybe polish the floors. This could fetch real value." "I don't want a big family," I said. "Not yet. Just someone respectful. Responsible. Quiet." Elaine smiled. "I've got just the tenant." A week later, I met her. Her name was Monica. A traveling nurse from Ohio. Early 30s. She wore soft-soled sneakers and a cardigan with coffee stains on the sleeve. "I'm here on a short-term hospital contract," she said. "I work odd hours. I mostly just sleep and read." She looked around the place with gentle eyes. I love that there's a garden, she said, stepping into the backyard. It smells like real life here. And that's when I knew this was the right choice. We signed the lease that afternoon. Elaine handled the keys. Monica moved in the next day with just 2 suitcases and a stack of books. The transformation was fast. Monica didn't just take care of the house, she nurtured it. She trimmed the roses out back, watered the basil, fixed the loose cabinet hinge I'd ignored for months. When she made tea, she used my old kettle, the one Julie said was too ugly to display. She left thank you notes on the fridge. Quiet ones. Small gestures. One evening, she asked if I wanted to come over for dinner. Just soup and bread. I almost said no. I hadn't been a guest in my own home in a long time. But I went. And she made lentil soup with fresh herbs. Real linen napkins. And for the first time in years, I sat at my own kitchen table and felt seen. Not used. Not tolerated. Seen. I didn't tell many people about what had happened with Mark and Julie. But news travels. A few neighbors asked casually, "Where did your son go?" I just said, "They moved." That was enough. But Gloria, my friend from church and the keeper of all secrets, knew everything. She invited me to lunch one afternoon and said, "I have to admit, I'm impressed. Most people your age would have just let it go." I almost did, I told her. But then I remembered something Harold used to say, "You teach people how to treat you." And I realized I'd been teaching them the wrong lesson for years. She nodded. "You taught them they could forget you. And still be fed." Not anymore. Gloria raised her iced tea. To unlearning. About a month after they left, I received a letter in the mail. Not an apology. Not even a card. A bill. From Julie. It was a copy of an old receipt, a couch she had ordered for the guest room 2 years ago. Scribbled in red pen at the bottom were the words, "You said you'd pay for this eventually. $689. I laughed out loud. Not a full laugh, a sharp, amused exhale. I folded the paper neatly and wrote a note on a yellow sticky pad. "You said you'd care for me. ICU says otherwise." Then I mailed it back. No check. No explanation. Just that one sentence. Monica stayed for 3 months. Then she got another placement in Oregon. She left me a handwritten letter before she left. Said the house gave her a sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. She left the garden blooming, the air filters replaced, and the pantry cleaner than it had ever been. After she left, Elaine texted me. "I've got 2 teachers interested. Quiet. Neat. Can we show the house next week?" I replied, "Let's do it." Somewhere in the middle of all this, I got a voicemail from Mark. Just one. His voice was low, uncertain. "Hi Mom. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. But Emily, she misses you. She doesn't understand why you're not around. She thinks maybe you don't love her anymore." My heart ached at that. Not for him, but for her. Emily was my granddaughter. She had nothing to do with the choices her parents made. She was just a child caught in the wind. The next day, I mailed her a letter. Not to Mark. To her. A simple envelope. Inside, a card with painted sunflowers and a short message. "Grandma loves you very much. I will always be here when you're ready. Always." No bitterness. Just truth. Weeks passed. One evening, I was standing in the backyard, trimming the rosemary when I heard a voice. "Grandma." I turned. It was Emily. 11 years old. Ponytail. Denim jacket. Holding a tote bag with books sticking out the top. I blinked, unsure if I was imagining it. "I asked Daddy to drive me here," she said softly. "I wanted to see the garden." I set down my shears. "Would you like to help me plant something?" She nodded. We didn't talk much that first visit. We just dug and planted. But before she left, she looked up at me and said, "I think what they did was wrong." I didn't correct her. I just said, "So do I." Now, Emily comes once a month. We bake. Garden. Paint. I haven't seen Mark or Julie since. And I don't expect to. But I no longer carry that weight. I gave them the house. They gave me the garage. And I gave myself a future they can no longer touch. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the gate buzzed. I was in the back garden, kneeling beside the mint patch, wearing my old sun hat and gloves that had seen better years. The buzzing startled me. Not many people visited unannounced these days. I stood slowly, joints crackling, and made my way to the front. When I opened the door, I didn't smile. Because there they were. Mark, Julie, and standing slightly behind them, arms folded across her chest and eyes wide, Emily. Julie wore sunglasses, the expensive kind, and a frown like the sun had offended her. Mark looked uncomfortable, shifting on his feet like a schoolboy caught cheating. Emily looked straight at me. "Mom," Mark said, trying to sound casual. "We're back." No apology. No remorse. Just that. I didn't say a word. Just leaned my frame against the door and waited. Julie stepped forward first. "I know things escalated. But it was a miscommunication. We thought the hospital said you were stable." "You left the country," I said. My voice was even. Not angry, just factual. Julie waved a manicured hand. "We had non-refundable tickets." Mark added, "We didn't think it would be that bad." I stared at him. "That bad?" I repeated. "I was in intensive care." Emily's lips tightened. She already knew. I could see it in her eyes. Julie was growing impatient. "Look. We just want to grab our stuff. That's all." "Our stuff?" I tilted my head. "You mean what you left in my home when you abandoned me in a hospital?" Mark flushed. "Mom, come on. Let's not do this in front of Emily." But it was already done. I stepped back inside and closed the door without another word. The next morning, I found a note slid under the door. It was written in Mark's handwriting. "We need to talk. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Let's be civil." I placed it in the shredder. I wasn't cruel. Just finished. I boxed up what they'd left behind, their mismatched mugs, old coats, the yoga mat Julie never used. I set it all in the garage. Elaine arranged for a moving company to handle the rest. I didn't even charge them for storage. But I changed the locks. Not out of spite. Out of self-respect. They tried again the following week. This time with a lawyer. The doorbell rang just as I was setting down a batch of lemon cookies for cooling. I opened the door to a younger man in a navy suit. Neat haircut. Clipboard in hand. "Ma'am," he began, "I represent Mr. and Mrs. Lancaster. I believe they were residing here under verbal tenancy." I raised a brow. "Verbal tenancy?" "They claim they had ongoing residence, and you changed the locks without legal notice." I didn't flinch. I walked back inside and returned with a folder. Inside were copies of the property trust agreement Harold and I had drawn up years ago. It stated clearly that Mark and Julie were permitted to live in the house, so long as they are actively caring for the homeowner's medical and personal needs. I handed the paper to the lawyer and pointed to the clause. Would leaving the homeowner unattended in a critical medical emergency qualify as care? He glanced down. "Read it." His lips tightened. "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "Then I suggest they find another couch to nap on," I said, and shut the door. Word got around quickly after that. Gloria from church told me someone posted about it on Facebook. Julie apparently had a meltdown online, claiming I was senile, that I'd tricked them, that I owed them gratitude for all they did. A few of her followers clapped back. One even posted, "If my mother-in-law paid the mortgage and nearly died alone while I was drinking margaritas, I wouldn't be bragging about it." That one made me laugh. Emily kept coming though. One afternoon, she sat with me on the porch steps, knees pulled to her chest. "I told Dad he was being a coward," she said quietly. I looked at her, really looked. She had Mark's eyes, but none of his weakness. She was observant. Quietly brave. "I think they're scared now," she added. "Of what?" She shrugged. "That you finally stopped saying yes." It took time for the house to settle again. Monica's lease had ended, and Elaine brought in a pair of retired teachers, Bill and Nancy. They were gentle souls, loved puzzles and birds, and kept to themselves. I moved into the guest house full-time. The space that once felt like a prison now felt like a sanctuary. I added bookshelves, my sewing machine, a small kitchenette. It was enough. Sometimes, silence is the kindest company. Mark emailed me once. Just once. Subject line, closure. He wrote, "You didn't have to humiliate us. We would have left if you asked. But now everyone thinks we're monsters." I didn't reply. He had missed the point entirely. I didn't want to humiliate them. I wanted them to see me, really see me, not just as a meal ticket or a soft cushion to fall back on. I wanted them to know I wasn't invisible. But some people only recognize worth when they can no longer claim it. One morning, I sat sipping coffee in the garden when Emily arrived earlier than usual. Her face was pink, her eyes wide. "I need to ask you something," she blurted. "Do you think people can change?" I set down my mug. "Yes," I said, after a pause. "But only if they want to. And most people don't want to." She nodded, looking down. "I want to grow up different." "You already are." She smiled, then leaned forward and whispered, "I told Mom I want to live with you next summer." I froze for a moment. Then said, "We'll make room." I'm not naive. I know what people think of stories like mine. They think old age equals weakness. That silence equals surrender. That we should be grateful just to exist in the background of our own homes. But I've learned this much. You don't have to raise your voice to take back your power. You just have to be willing to walk away from the people who never valued it to begin with. And lock the damn door behind you. Winter settled in quietly, as if the world itself had decided to whisper for a while. The garden wilted into browns and grays, but I didn't mind. The frost felt honest, something I'd come to appreciate more than warmth from people who only smiled when it served them. By now, the house felt like mine again. Not because I'd changed the locks, but because I'd changed the energy. The air was still, peaceful, and filled with people who respected my space, not used it. Nancy brought over fresh banana bread once a week. Bill offered to repair a few loose boards on the side porch. Monica's laughter echoed from the back unit when her friends visited for game night. The whole place thrived without a single Lancaster in it. Funny how a home can come alive after shedding dead weight. One morning, I opened the mailbox to find a large white envelope addressed to me. Thick paper. Gold trim. A wedding invitation. I knew before I even opened it. Mark and Julie were finally making it official. Of course they were. The date was set for spring. Venue, a winery. The note at the bottom read, "No children, no pets, and kindly no drama." I actually laughed. Drama? The most dramatic thing I ever did was not die when they expected me to. The next week, I got a visit from an old friend, Beverly. We hadn't spoken in years. Not for any bad reason, just life. Time. Silence stretching too long until you forget how to bridge it. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around her teacup like she was afraid it might jump. "I saw the post Julie made," she finally said. I raised a brow. "Which one?" "The one where she called you vindictive. Said you turned your family against her. That you manipulated Emily." I snorted. "Well, that's rich." Beverly leaned in. "She's been telling people you only kicked them out so you could turn the house into a rental empire." "Good," I said. "Let her. The more she talks, the more she reveals." Beverly blinked. "So it's true." I sipped my tea. "I'm 80, Bev. If I'm going to die someday, I want to go with my name on the deed and my dignity intact. I don't owe them the floor beneath their feet, not when they stood on me to reach their vacations." The wedding invites sat unopened on my shelf for days. Then one evening, Emily showed up with a grocery bag full of lemons and asked if we could bake. We made lemon shortbread, Harold's favorite. While the oven warmed the house, she sat on the stool beside the counter, fidgeting with the measuring spoons. "They're making me wear a dress I hate," she said. "Then don't wear it." She looked at me like I'd just told her the moon was hers to borrow. "They'll be furious." "They're already furious," I said calmly. "Might as well be comfortable." She smiled. "I wish you'd come. Just so I'd have one person there who sees me." "I'll think about it," I said, even though we both knew I wouldn't. But I did send a gift. A framed photo from my wedding day. Harold and I, in black and white, smiling at each other like the world hadn't touched us yet. On the back, I wrote, "Marriage is more than convenience. It's a promise. Keep yours better than your parents kept theirs." Weeks passed. The wedding came and went. I didn't ask how it was. Emily didn't offer. But I could tell by the slump in her shoulders when she came back that it had been a show. Gloss without substance. Her mother probably smiled for the camera while tightening her grip behind closed doors. Emily sat on my porch swing that Sunday, sipping hot cocoa. She didn't say much. Just leaned into my shoulder like a child again. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just reclaiming my home. I was rebuilding my legacy. Then, something strange happened. One morning, the landline rang. Not many people use it anymore. But I keep it plugged in, mostly out of habit. "Hello?" A pause. Then a familiar voice. "Mom. Mark." I didn't speak. He sighed. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I waited. For everything, he added, like that covered it all. Silence stretched between us like a rope, taut, fragile. "You almost died," he said, quieter. "And I wasn't there. That's not something I can undo." "No," I said. "It's not." He was quiet again. "I just thought you should hear me say it." I nodded to myself. "I did hear it," I said. "And I hope you meant it." He exhaled like he'd been holding something too heavy for too long. "I did. I really did." Then, after a moment, "Goodbye, Mom." I said goodbye too. And when I hung up, I didn't cry. Because some goodbyes are exactly what you need. Later that day, Emily brought over an envelope with my name written in blue ink. It was a letter. From Julie. I braced myself. It read, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I regret what we did. I let fear and pride drive me, and now I see the damage. You didn't deserve that. I hope Emily turns out more like you than me." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the back of my recipe book. Not for safekeeping. Just so I could remember that sometimes, people do change. Even if it's too late to fix what's broken. I never saw them again. Not in person, at least. Julie sent Emily back and forth a few more times that spring, then less often as the months wore on. I think they realized Emily had made her choice, and it wasn't them. She started staying longer. Spending weekends. Then full weeks. Eventually, she moved into the upstairs unit. I handed her a key without a word. She hugged me so tightly I felt my ribs hum. "I'll pay rent," she insisted. "No," I said. "You'll pay it forward." The neighborhood knew me differently now. Not as the sweet old lady in the big house. But as the one who drew her line in stone, not sand. People waved more. Stopped to talk. Asked for gardening tips. I felt seen. Not pitied. Not tolerated. Respected. One warm June afternoon, I stood in the driveway while Emily helped carry in groceries. She looked over at me, hands full of apples, and said, "You don't realize it, but you started something." I raised an eyebrow. This whole place feels different now. Safer. Stronger. I looked at the house, sun-drenched, alive with blooming vines and laughter echoing from a nearby window. "I didn't start anything," I said. "I just stopped letting people erase me." She smiled. Same smile I'd seen in the mirror years ago, back when I still believed being quiet meant being kind. The last time I saw Mark in person was 2 years before the hospital. His shoulders were hunched as he asked if I could watch Emily for the weekend while he and Julie went to a conference in Dallas. I said yes, of course. I always said yes. Back then, I still thought saying yes was the only way to keep love in the room. But love doesn't grow in obligation. It shrinks. And when I woke up in the ICU with no family beside me, I realized I'd been trimming my own roots to let someone else bloom. Never again. Life since that day hasn't been perfect, nothing ever is, but it's been mine. I walk every morning, just around the block. Slow steps, steady. My cane tapping against the pavement. People wave. One little boy runs out from his front yard just to walk beside me. His name is Theo. He says I remind him of a wise movie wizard. I told him I'd take it. Emily flourishes now. Not in rebellion, but in clarity. She makes her own meals, pays her share, bakes bread on Sundays and leaves a loaf outside each neighbor's door. It's her way of saying we're good people here. She told me she wants to study architecture. Said she wants to build spaces that feel like protection, not just shelter. I cried when she said that. She thought she said it casually. But I heard the weight behind it. You can always tell when a child grows up feeling disposable. They design everything around permanence. One evening, I sat on the porch reading. A cool breeze stirred the magnolia branches. Dusk settling soft like memory. That's when I saw them. Julie and Mark. Parked at the end of the block. Not coming up the driveway. Just sitting in their car. Watching. I didn't move. I let them. Let them see the fresh paint on the house. The repaired shingles. The new number plate, big and bold, 408, the Martin residence. Not their home anymore. Not their narrative, either. They didn't come to the door. Didn't call. And the next day, the car wasn't there. But a letter was. In my mailbox. We were wrong. We know it. We're happy you're okay. We miss Emily, but we understand. I read it twice. Then fed it into the shredder like any other junk mail. Closure isn't about what they say. It's about what I no longer need to hear. A month later, I hosted my first official neighborhood dinner. People brought chairs, dishes, stories. We used the backyard. Hung string lights between the trees. Played old records from Harold's collection. At one point, someone asked, "What made you rent out your house?" I paused. The old me would have told the whole story, every betrayal, every lonely beep of the heart monitor. But I just smiled and said, needed a change. Because that's the truth. Revenge isn't fire and fury. Sometimes, it's peace they don't get to be part of. Emily made a toast that night. She stood in the middle of the yard, holding a glass of sparkling cider, face lit by lantern glow. To the house that kept standing, even when people forgot what home is. People clapped. But I didn't. I just looked at her, and my heart clapped for both of us. A few weeks later, I got a package. Inside was a first draft of Emily's college application essay. Typed, printed. At the top. The day my grandmother changed everything. I didn't even get past the first paragraph before my eyes blurred. She wrote about the day I changed the locks. About how people say revenge is bitter, but she saw it differently. It wasn't about getting even. It was about finally choosing herself. She said that gave her permission to choose herself too. That essay got her into every school she applied to. She chose one not too far, just a few hours away. I told her I'd be fine. And I meant it. But the house was quiet after she left. Too quiet. I thought I'd feel lonely. Instead, I felt proud. That house, the one I'd nearly died in, the one they thought they owned, it still stood. Stronger than ever. And so did I. Julie emailed once. Said she hoped I'd let them visit someday. That maybe we could all sit down, talk, rebuild. I never responded. Not because I'm cruel. But because healing doesn't require reopening the same doors that led to the wound. This house has 4 doors now. Front. Back. Upstairs apartment. Basement. Each one has a lock. Each one has a key. And none of them are in the hands of people who would leave me to die while they lounged poolside. I don't tell this story because I want sympathy. I tell it because I want someone out there, someone like me, to hear it and know, you are not too old to reclaim your life. Not too old to demand respect. Not too old to change everything. Even if your hands shake while you do it. Even if your voice cracks. Even if they call you bitter, dramatic, ungrateful. They called me all of that. But they had to do it from the sidewalk. Because the door was locked. And I finally had the only key that mattered.